Okay, so today we're going to see if I can do well on a tablet and explain to you the intricacies of Veil, since many of you have asked about it and hopefully can get a greater understanding of how it works. So, I begin with my explanation of Veil by saying um, it's when you load it up, there are a few options, there are a few things, so we'll take it a bit at a time. But in general, the format is language, shell type, and the binding or encoding, and these are MSF console payloads. First up, we'll talk a little about how the shell works. In general, we've been we've encountered two types of shells. Um, for the Windows 7 and Windows 8, we've used Meterpreter, which is quite functional, does a lot of stuff. Um, Swiss Army knife, really integrated within MSF console, and some, but sometimes it doesn't work. Like on Linux, where we had to use the they call the Unix shell, which is a bash prompt. Um, it gets the job done, not as full featured, and gotta do some you gotta do some digging around to get it to run correctly. And some of you have used the Windows shell. This might be useful for this project, and there are a couple commands, differences between Windows Shell and Interpreter. Like, you're used to LS. In Windows, it's dir for directory, so instead of list, we have directory. Instead of cat, which is cat concatenate, which makes sense if you load multiple files. They will load up in the terminal one after another. Windows, that is type. So we have that going here with the shell, and the shell and the binding or interpreter payload are two things worth paying attention to while setting up a Veil ordinance. Um, so with the bindings, as I said, those are the MSF console payloads. So while looking at your list of things, you'll notice obviously the language, the shell, and the binding types have things like reverse TCP or reverse HTTP, for example. And these will coincide with the payload you pick in Meterpreter, or not Meterpreter, MSF console. So, since we're going after Windows targets, if you pick a Meterpreter session, you would have to set set payload for reverse TCP, Windows / Meterpreter / reverse TCP. And I'm sure you know these are all tab completable, so don't worry if you don't feel like spelling all of it out. Much like reverse TCP, if you want to do with reverse HTTP, but say you want the Windows shell, you would do set payload Windows shell reverse HTTP in the MSF console. So we're gonna go into a little more detail in language and flesh out a command. So again, we have language shell and binding, which is the MSF console payload. So with language, you see a lot of things, but you basically only need to worry about a few. I'll just list out what we have. We have auto IT, auxiliary C, C sharp, which is CS, because why put in ampersands or a pound sign if you don't need it? Lua, Perl, Go, Ruby, and Python. And right off the bat, I'll tell you while looking at that, C sharp won't compile. Lua cannot execute on the Windows. Perl you cannot execute on the Windows. Oh, and I forgot. PowerShell. PowerShell outputs as a bat and throws up a warning on Windows saying, "Are you sure you want to run a bat file from an untrusted source?" And in general, we're running scripts on the target, so since they're unsupervised, let's forget about PowerShell too. So now we have, oh, forgot to mention auxiliary. That's beyond the scope, so don't worry about that. So we have AutoIT, C, Go, Ruby, and Python. Each of these have various types of shells and bindings. You'll see some of them say interpreter, slash rev TCP, for example. And if you see interpreter slash rev TCP, that means in MSF console, your payload is reverse TCP using interpreter. Some say generic. Say rev HTTP, which for interpreter, your MSF console, that would be Windows shell reverse HTTP. And others say flat, which means you'll be picking your shell and your console payload through options there, and they give you a good amount of flexibility. So again, you match up the type of shell and the binding, and that is your payload in MSF console. Another thing to consider is generic. You're setting Windows /shell, because these could both be the Unix. So for Unix, which is not the project, you would do Unix /shell /whatever. There's also another option I encountered, which is bind TCP, and this would go where this would go. So if it says bind TCP, you would do for your payload Windows /shell /bind TCP. Should be in there. If not, try something different. Alright, so that being the case, I'll say a few things before wrapping this up. If virus is deleted, try different language. If it's not deleted automatically, wait for callback. Okay. Um, if the virus not deleted, but it is deleted when you enter shell. Um, Try a different shell. Or binding. So, for example, if you're doing the shell of Windows slash interpreter slash whatever, and that gets deleted. Do Windows shell, which is generic. In Veil rather, um, whatever it was up here. Um, if the shell crashes or times out, try a different shell. Well, try a different shell or binding. There are some that will connect, and there are some that won't connect. It's part of the exercise to figure out which does which. Um, and with that, I'll say if you have any questions, reach out to Dr. Hanson. Thank you.